Hello, watchers and listeners, and welcome one and all to this week's Author Interview Plunge. Regular watchers and listeners will remember our interview with John Byer, a California-based school administrator who writes detective and terrorism novels. Today's guest is Joseph Lewis, a school administrator from the Washington, D.C. area who writes thriller mysteries. Something tells me if these two ever meet in the center of the U.S., detentions will never be the same. By the way, folks, we're in the principal's office. Yeah, I feel like I'm back home. Okay. Anyway, sorry. All right. Joseph Lewis, and note that Grace first name he has, Joseph, that's incredible, has worked in education for 41 years as teacher, coach, counselor, and administrator. His characters and dialogue are based on his years in studying and practicing psychology and counseling and his knowledge and fondness for kids. In addition, Joseph's taken creative writing and screenwriting courses at UCLA and USC. Born and raised in Wisconsin, Lewis is the second youngest in a family of 10, most of whom are teachers and nurses. He's been happily married for 25 years to his wife, Kim. Together they have 3 wonderful children, Will, who unfortunately is deceased in July of 2014, Hannah and Emily, and they now reside in Virginia. I'm not going to read excerpts from Joseph's work. I am going to tell you that it took some turns that surprised me, and that's not easy to do. Joseph is an author who's willing to take on risky subjects, deal with harsh issues, and write poignantly about them. I can only hope that some of his storylines are from newspapers and not his own life. Trolls and troglodytes, thriller and mystery aficionados, please welcome Joseph Lewis.
Thank you.
My pleasure, Mr. Lewis, or should I say Principal Lewis?
No, just plain Joe.
Okay, Joe. Okay, very good, Joe. Joe, I'm going to jump right into the questions if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Very good. You come from a family of 10. Did a need to be heard above the din lead you to become an author?
No, not really. I'm second youngest, and our family is really effectively in halves. You had the ones at the top, or the old farts, as I call them. They took care of the younger ones at the bottom. And we were all fairly equal, at least on the lower end of the age. And so we all had our opportunity to be in the sun and all that good stuff.
Okay, so there wasn't really so much of a hierarchy, so much as an ageology.
Yes, that is correct.
Very good.
Although my brothers might beg to differ, but that's all right.
Yeah, but they're not on camera. So
that's exactly right.
You write thrillers and are moving into psychological thriller fiction. I believe the title of that book is Spiral in the Darkness. Now, no spoilers. What can you tell us about that book?
We have a real brilliant mind out there, devious, has not been caught, and he has a list, and he's killing people on this list. FBI, local law enforcement has no leads, no clues, don't know how to get him, but there are 2 kids in a family on this list. They don't know it. Local law enforcement doesn't know it. And so it now becomes a race. How do we find this guy? Who's on the list, and what is the why behind his killing?
Okay. That book, if I remember correctly, that book it's a sequel, or it grew out of your recently released Caught in the Web. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
If you think of like James Patterson's books with Alex Cross characters, it's the same kind of characters that are in each of his books, but it's a different story. So I would look at the same way with this one.
Okay. And Caught in the Web, that was published recently, April?
April 26th, right.
Okay, very good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Some of that book draws on your losing a son to violence and your work counseling at a California barrio school. Again, no spoilers. What can you tell us about that?
There are kids and adults, but mostly kids, that are dying of overdose of heroin and fentanyl mix. And local law enforcement, just like everywhere else in the country, is concerned about it because the mortality rate is growing. So they're trying to find out who it is that is selling the drugs, where it's coming from. At the same time, MS-13 gets wind of it, somebody trying to cut in on their business. So they send an enforcer up, known as the Blade. And he is going to put a stop to it. So we have two investigations, one legal and one not so much. And so now it becomes a race to find out who it is, where the drugs are coming from, who is behind it, before Ricardo Fuentes gets involved.
So fascinating. This takes place in Madison, right?
No, Waukesha, Wisconsin, outside of Milwaukee.
Okay, outside of Milwaukee.
In fact, that's pretty much the setting for many of my books.
Okay, good. Well, you're writing about home then, I guess.
A little bit, yeah.
Very good. So this book has two protagonists then?
No, one's definitely an antagonist.
Oh, okay.
That's Fuentes.
All right.
And then the protagonists, I guess you could say, yes, they're two kids with some help from local law enforcement, yes.
Okay. Again, fascinating. I'm going to be looking for that one. Okay, going back a bit into your history. You've worked previously, you were an adjunct with the Wetterling Foundation for Stranger Abducted and Sexually Exploited Kids. That must be emotionally draining work, number one. What prompted that affiliation?
I was on a flight back home. I was living in Wisconsin at the time. I was single at the time. And it was right around Christmas time, and I was flying back home to celebrate Christmas with my family. And in the pocket of the seat in front of me was the different magazines and things. And there was an article, it was Northwest Flight. And there was an article about this missing boy, Jacob Wetterling, 11 years old, end of October, right near Halloween, but not on Halloween, just before, who was taken at gunpoint in front of witnesses by a man wearing a mask and brandishing a gun. His particular case represented, the research shows that it's really 1% of all abductions that occur in the United States. You don't have that series you don't have that sequence at all in any of the MOs that are out there. It's just so rare. And he was from a small town, St. Joe, Minnesota. His background, he loved football. That was his favorite sport. He wanted to be a football player when he grew up. He also played some hockey. He came from a fairly small family. He was his second oldest. Jerry is a chiropractor. Patty was basically a stay-at-home mom, was a former teacher, things like that. And I was just moved. It just bothered me. How could somebody take a child? And then you question, why did they take the child? And it just weighed on me. And so it was really in December after Christmas that I contacted the Wetterling Foundation and I said, how can I help? And it was Patty who actually said, well, what can you do to help? And I said, well, I write and I can speak. And so they kind of put me to work. So I did a number of parent assemblies, kid assemblies, talking about stranger danger, which is, we kind of did a disservice to kids and parents by introducing that, because when kids are molested, when kids are sexually abused, most of the time it's someone who is known to the kid and known to the family. It's not this kid, it's not this adult with a trench coat lurking in the woods, although it can be that. So I did a lot of that, but then I met my wife and we had our own children. Hannah was born to us in November of '93, and in December of '93, I flew to Guatemala to get my son Will. He was adopted, so we had two in 1 month, neither speaking English. So we were trilingual. We were English, Spanish, and charades, probably mostly charades. And I couldn't give the talks that I would give, because instead of, I shouldn't say faceless kids or nameless kids, because I tried to bring it home to them, I started picturing my son Will and my daughter Hannah, and I just found I couldn't do it. But the stories, their stories, stayed with me, and I always had this need to give back. And that's what prompted me to write the Lives trilogy,
Mhm.
Taking Lives, Stolen Lives, Shattered Lives, and Splintered Lives. The prequel was Taking Lives, and then the other three books, Stolen, Shattered, and Splintered, were the trilogy. And that was my way, my effort to try to bring to light human trafficking and sexual exploitation. And it's not an easy read. It is I would call it dark. People
Yes.
have called it dark, but at the same time, the reviews have been, fabulous for the most part.
Good.
And I appreciate people giving that book a chance, especially if they read the author's notes. It explains my reasoning, my
Mhm.
focus, and my drive to write those.
Yes. So for anyone in the audience who questions, have you had experience dealing with these issues? Yes.
Yes.
It's not like you suddenly woke up and said, "Hey, this would be an interesting storyline." No,
Oh no,
this is
no. In fact, I give. There are certain situations and events in each of those books that were given to me by kids that I counseled. Obviously, I changed the name, and obviously, I changed the locations, and I changed some of the details and things like that. But basically, some of the things that those kids told me, you will find in my writing.
okay. And as I said in the introduction, I was impressed. You take risks and you surprise me. And
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It wasn't easy to write, but at the same time, it was easy to
yeah.
write because, as a writer, as an author, you sometimes just get on a roll
Oh
and
yeah.
characters surprise you and you just
Yep.
kind of go with it.
Yes. Okay. Human trafficking, sexual exploitation. And I have to ask, you're based 45 minutes out of DC. These issues are political issues. They're global issues. Does politics ever play a role in your writing?
Not to a great extent, although when you have local law enforcement trying to work with FBI, that's always catchy because you know, local law enforcement sometimes feels that when FBI comes in, they take over. And in certain situations, that's just the reality of it. There are certain, I guess, aspects of the criminal investigation and the forensics play that I bring out in my writing that will have the politics. But other than that, I try to stay away from it.
hmm Okay. So far, you stayed away from it.
Yes.
Okay.
That's not to say I might dabble in it in the future.
Yeah, there you go. Everything's possible. We're fiction writers.
That's
Okay.
correct.
You've worked with Two Visions Publishing and you're now with Black Rose. What caused the switch and can you share your experiences with each?
When I wanted to publish the Lives trilogy, uh, I tried to get an agent, and I had one, and it was such a difficult book that it was just a hard sell. And I stumbled upon, actually, there were a couple of different publishers that jumped at it and wanted to publish it. They were all small. I didn't want to go the self-publishing route. Um, so I chose True Visions came along, and at that time I only had Stolen Lives, the first book of the trilogy. And the owner, publisher, said, we would really like to have a series, and we would like you to write a book that would introduce the trilogy. So I wrote Taking Lives as an introduction. It's a very quick read. It's not a very long book at all. And it introduces three main characters. George, a Navajo Indian, his grandfather, and then Brett, who is a boy that um, has some untoward things happening. And then it introduces those characters, and I leave the reader hanging on purpose to introduce them to Stolen Lives. And Stolen Lives takes place 2 years after Taking Lives. And then as that was being published, I wrote Shattered Lives and Splintered Lives. So that has been a really interesting journey. Now, I switched because with True Visions Publications, I was doing a lot of the marketing. It was a smaller outfit. I just wanted something a little bit bigger that would be able to help me out in terms of marketing and publicity and things like that. So I did some shopping, and it came down to like 3 different publishers. And I chose Black Rose just because of the reputation that they've had. In fact, this year they've had 2 Maxi Award winners. And it's just, they do a really nice job. They will share the publicity. In other words, if I put in $250 worth of marketing publicity, they will match that, things like that. So, and that's, you don't find that very much. I still do a great share. I put out my material on Facebook groups. I use Twitter quite a bit. I use Instagram, not so much, and Pinterest, really not at all. But it has just been a real help to have a little bit bigger oomph behind the books.
Yep. Black Rose, who you're with now, they're mid-level. The traditional publisher, which I believe means print and ebook version.
That is correct.
Right, yeah. So you actually have books on shelves in bookstores. Good for you. Congratulations. You told me previously, as you just did, that you share marketing with them. Is there a cap on that? You mentioned 250.
No, I can base it. The cap is really on me.
Okay.
And really what I can afford. They're willing to go wherever, I go with money. But I am in education, and we certainly aren't rich. So, you basically do what you can do, and you go from there.
Okay, good. Well, so long as you're happy, that's all that counts. All right. Let's get back to Joseph Lewis, the author. What's your favorite personal anecdote, good or bad, about yourself?
I actually started out on stage singing and in theater when I was in about the 4th grade. I was in a high school production of Bye Bye Birdie. I was Conrad. My brother Jack was my dad. And, and that was kind of fun. I had 2 solos, and in later elementary, I was doing a lot of solo work. When I went to high school, I was cutting commercials for the boarding school that I went to. I cut some demo tapes, and obviously they were really successful because that's why I'm still in education. But as principal, I was actually in a couple of drama productions at a couple of schools, and so that has been real fun. At graduation, I actually sing the principal's address, and what I do is see, sometimes what happens is that there's a lot of speeches at commencement, and most everybody, I really challenge someone out there who might be listening to remember a really moving commencement speech. And I decided a way long time ago when I first became a principal that the words are forgotten. And what I do is I try to pick a song that matches either the time or the graduating class, and I choose the lyrics, the song real carefully, and I sing it. And I usually have student musicians, either from the graduating class or the previous class, or in my case here, some graduates, and it's kind of a mix. And that way, they might not remember the words, but as soon as that song hits radio, that's Lewis's song, or that's our graduation song. And I still have parents and kids come back to me years later and talk about the song, and it becomes that thing that Stafford High School does.
So is this on YouTube? Can we find this on YouTube?
You probably could. In fact, there is one of my favorites in 2014. That graduating class I sang One Republic's I Lived. And that, ironically, when my son was killed in July of 2014, that same year, without me even mentioning it, knowing it, his classmates from college put together a video montage and used that song as the background, which was just, it was just a weird, wonderful coincidence.
Well, that's wonderful and touching. Um, I'm going to flip back and forth a bit here.
Sure.
Let's talk marketing for one more second. You do book signings, and I'm assuming you do other interviews, which are far less fun than this one. I understand that. Uh, you do Facebook, social media. You mentioned. How successful has that been? And would you recommend? Which things would you recommend? Would you recommend the social media? Would you recommend doing more interviews? Book signings? Do you go to conferences? What's the blend for you that works?
Any of it and all of it, I would recommend. The writer, there are what, a million books out there right now, and I have one book out of a million, and so trying to get the word out, trying to get people to notice, caught in the web right now, it's hard.
Mhm.
And I don't have the James Patterson name or the John Sandford name, the Jim Cunley name, or the Jeffrey Deaver name. I'm Joseph Lewis, and people say, "Who's that?" Unless you're local. And so when I do book signings, I enjoy it as much as the people who come to me, because we get to talk like this. I'm able to give tips to other would-be writers and things like that. Plus, I get to sell a couple of books and sign my name in them for people and things like
Mhm.
that. So, Facebook gets word out. I'm really appreciative of that. Sometimes you end up in Facebook hell, and those of you that are writers know exactly what I'm talking about. You get your hand slapped, and then you're banished for a couple of days and things like that. But Twitter helps, Facebook helps. It all helps because, like I said, you're competing with a million other books that are out there.
Okay, very good to know. Who are your favorite fictional characters in your own books? And it's not Fuentes, right?
No, that'd be really dark for the principal,
Yeah,
wouldn't
really.
it?
There goes my detention ideas again. Okay.
Yeah, there's a little bit something waiting for you in the detention room. Um, no, my favorite characters are, I really like the character of George. He's a 15-year-old. When he first started, he was 12 years old, Navajo boy who had this dream of joining the Navajo Nation Police. And through a number of circumstances, he became what's called a hatele, which is a kind of a shaman, or in Gringo language, a medicine man. And that's what his grandfather was kind of training him for. But his grandfather ended up dying. I won't say how. And George ended up being adopted by this kindly counselor, Jeremy Evans, and living in Waukesha with, now it's five other boys. And it's a happy family. Each of them have their own struggles. And I also like the character of Brett, he's the leader of the pack. Hasn't been around the great amount of time that some of the others, but he's the bona fide leader, and he's the athlete, he's the brains. But there are some real doubts that he has. There are some questions that he has, and I tend to write adolescence as clearly and as honestly as I can, knowing the kids that I work with on a day-to-day basis or have worked with. And so you're going to find that I know these kids. When you read them, you're going to be able to picture them. And that's what my readers have been telling me, that they like the character development the most.
Hmm. Excellent. Very good. Who's your favorite fictional character in someone else's books?
I've always had a liking for Sherlock Holmes from way, way back. I really like Alex Cross. I do like Lucas Davenport. Those tend to be my three all-time favorites. Lucas Davenport, because he's this hard guy who's has no real personality other than he's just a hard man, former athlete, smart guy who doesn't really have this warm, fuzzy personality. Alex Cross, because he's bright. He chooses to live in the south side of DC. And I just like Sherlock Holmes, this intellectual guy who solves crimes many times by sitting in his chair.
Okay, so obviously intellectual heroes have
Yeah.
meaning to you and physically
And that
fit.
is not to say that I am by any means,
Oh,
believe me.
okay. Yeah, you had to say that. All right. Okay. So 15-year-old Navajo George is sitting down with Alex Cross talking about you. They've both talked with you. What are they saying to each other about you?
About me as the author?
No, they've been talking with you. They know you. What are they saying about you? What are their takeaways from about talking with you, about knowing you? Alex Cross, obviously, I'm not Alex Cross, but George started when he was 12. Now he's 15. So he's
He
had some
knows
time
me.
with you. Yeah.
I would say that they're going to talk about how they feel that they can come to me with just about anything, that I'm going to tell it like it is. There's an honesty, but yet there's a compassion. There's a gentleness. Uh, Lewis is a guy who cares about them and cares about others. And sometimes when you wear your heart on a sleeve, it gets knocked off and it gets bruised and it gets crushed sometimes. And it's sometimes they have to pick me up as much as I have to help pick up others.
Okay. What was the most memorable thing you've heard from a reader or fan?
One reader liked the character of George so much that she wanted me to focus a story solely on George. They want me to take him into adulthood. And what is the adult George Takei doing
Hmm.
in real life right now? Is he solving crimes?
Mhm.
What is it that he's actually doing? And I thought that was really interesting, and
Yeah,
that's something I might explore down the road.
definitely. And you'll get politics involved. Okay. Um, if you could have been the author of any book ever written, which book would it be?
Probably something by Hawthorne, Nathaniel
Hmm.
Hawthorne.
Hmm.
I like
Good choices.
I like I like his style. I did not like Scarlet Letter. I, I couldn't find a character I really truly liked in that book, but I like his approach to senses, his setting, his the way he describes people, the way he describes events, places. I really like that. So anything by Nathaniel Hawthorne.
Very good. We've heard the best comment from a reader. What was the worst comment from a reader?
That Lewis is perverted. He is disgusting. He the books in the Lives trilogy ought to be banned and burned along with Lewis, basically.
Wow. So to evoke that strong a reaction, that's some powerful writing.
Well, yeah, it hurt. I want you to say, I want to say, but at the same time, the person actually stuck with it. I mean, the person actually read it, and if I succeeded in bringing to light an ugly aspect of human nature and what is important in getting kids safe and keeping them safe, I did my job.
Congratulations. Good work. All right. Joseph, Lewis, we've kept everyone in the principal's office for coming on half an hour now. I appreciate it. One more question, sir. What question do you wish that someone would ask about you or your book, but nobody has?
I had kind of expected somebody somewhere down the road to say, which character in the book is you, me as the writer? And no one has really asked me that. And I would say that there's a part of Lewis in each of the characters, not necessarily the experiences that they've had, but their thoughts, their feelings, their fears, their confidence. Um, I'm probably as old as Pete Kelleher, who's an FBI agent. I'm kind of on the heavy side and struggling with fitness, just like he is. But I think I probably am most like Jeremy Evans, the counselor. I would like to think I'm most like Jeremy Evans, the counselor, but I see myself in a number of the kids that I write about.
I think we all write autobiography. We just don't realize it.
I agree.
We're in. Anything else, sir? This has been wonderful. I thank you for your time. Joseph, that great first name, Lewis, author of the Shattered Lives books, available through Black Rose Publishing.
Well, the Lives trilogy is actually through True Visions, but everything's available on Amazon.
Okay. Which book is through Black Rose?
Caught in a Web.
Okay, so it's Caught in a Web and then perhaps Spiral in the Darkness as well, maybe?
I hope so.
Okay, very good. My apologies, but we'll have links to all of that on this page. Principal Lewis, I'm sorry, I had to say it. Joseph Lewis, thank you so much for your time. This has been an outstanding interview. You write beautiful. You write beautifully, and as I said in the introduction, the material you sent me to review, it surprised me, it was poignant, and I could feel the character's pain. And that's, congratulations. That is not easy to pull off. That's quite the bit of technique you have there.
Hey, thank you. I really appreciate that. It means a lot.
My pleasure, sir. So thank you so much, and talk to you later.
You bet.
Bye-bye.